Welcome back. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating, honestly kind of chilling documentary source called The Architect of Shadows. Right from the jump, this material sets a totally suspenseful stage. We're looking at a gritty, deep dive analysis of India's modern geopolitical trajectory. We're going to examine what the source describes as a truly ruthless, calculated pivot toward absolute energy security. It frames this whole thing not as your typical story of, peaceful alliances, but as an absolute masterclass in raw survival. Okay, let's dive into this. The documentary opens with this incredibly heavy, uncompromising premise. It instantly hooks you by framing statecraft entirely differently, not as standard diplomatic handshakes, but as raw power mechanics. Literally, strategic cruelty. To understand the future this maps out, we really have to strip away any romantic notions of espionage. We're talking about the sheer patience required to step entirely into the shadows. Section 1. The Cruel Infiltration, the Origin of the Shadow Architect. The source material argues that to make sense of the massive geopolitical explosion of 2026, we actually have to go back. We have to examine a cold-blooded baseline established decades earlier in Pakistan. The documentary breaks down a 7-year deep cover infiltration by Ajit Doval, and this brilliantly illustrates the sheer intensity of it all. Look at this progression. Year 1 is all about mimicking faith, just blending in. Then, by year 4, the mission evolves into literally weaponizing trust. And by year 7, it's about methodically mapping out the vulnerabilities of a regional rival. The source really leans into the extreme psychological toll of living a complete lie, essentially acting as a parasite within a rival state. The documentary insists this was a mission of absolute coldness. No cinematic heroics here, right? This clandestine history, literally breaking bread with people while secretly plotting their containment, forged a very specific, unyielding mentality, a sort of dirty spy mindset. And the source argues this exact mentality became the foundational blueprint for India's modern offensive defense strategy. Section 2. Securing the Energy Jugular, the 2026 Geopolitical Chokehold. Now fast forward to April 2026. The pace of events here gets wild. The global energy jugular, the Strait of Hormuz, is violently tightening. The material drops this massive, alarming statistic. Iran's uranium enrichment has reached a critical 90% level. Absolute panic. The specter of instability is suddenly looming huge. Now, just think about what a chokehold on global oil actually does to the prices at your local gas station or your grocery bill. For the world's most populous nation, this wasn't just some economic headache. It was a direct existential threat to their very survival. Because quite simply, the Indian dream stalls if the oil stops. Faced with this intense crisis, the documentary notes a massive, aggressive shift in New Delhi's posture. They decided they were absolutely done just asking for a seat at the global table. Instead, they adopted a strategy of ruthlessly securing the kitchen themselves. Section 3. The Three-Pronged Push, Infiltrating the Halls of Power. So the crucial point is understanding how this overarching strategy moves from those gritty undercover streets straight to the high-rise palaces of the Gulf to counter all that global pressure. We're talking about the three-pronged outreach. And make no mistake, this was not some standard legacy diplomacy. The documentary portrays it as an infiltration driven by dirty intentions, a cold, calculated pursuit of raw power. The goal was to completely bypass traditional Western alliances and forcefully grab the world's energy throat. To actually pull this off, India deployed its absolute master tacticians all at once. Ajit Doval is sent to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, as Shankar is deployed to Abu Dhabi in the UAE, and Hardeep Singh Puri is sent to Qatar. The documentary methodically connects their high-level diplomatic titles with a fundamentally cold-blooded mission to secure the flow of energy. While the rest of the world was literally panicking over the Strait of Hormuz, these three were quietly securing the pipeline. Section 4. The Unholy OPEC Betrayal, the Exploding Cartel. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this maneuvering leads directly to the climax of the explainer, what the documentary calls the OPEC Explosion, a manufactured rift that completely shattered the global energy landscape. The source maps out this sequence exactly like a massive heist. Step 1. On April 27th, Doval holds a highly strategic meeting with UAE President MBZ. Step 2. We enter this crazy 48-hour silent window of cold calculation. And then, step 3. The UAE executes the unthinkable and formally abandons OPEC. In the high-stakes world of geopolitics, the documentary argues, there are simply no coincidences. By pulling the UAE away from the Saudi-led bloc, The documentary asserts that India didn't just stumble upon a willing supplier. They actively engineered an unholy alliance. I mean, how do you secure your own survival when the chips are down? Well, according to this analysis, you manufacture a rift. You deliberately break the decades-old Brotherhood of the Gulf for pure unilateral gain. Section 5, Collapse of the Petrodollar. The New Dominion. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames the profound macroeconomic assassination resulting from this fracture. The source draws a really stark contrast here between the dying age of oil cartels and a new reality. On one side, we have the old world. That's defined by Gulf brotherhoods, rigid OPEC cartel pricing, traditional Western alliances, and of course, the absolute dominance of the petrodollar. But on the other side, the documentary outlines the new dominion. This is a newly established, ruthless energy architecture built entirely on bilateral survival, preferential energy rates, absolute strategic autonomy, and a definitive shift toward rupee-based trade. As the source somewhat poetically puts it, the petrodollar gasps for air, while the rupee finds its voice. This incredibly bold, definitive move allowed India to just completely bypass the OPEC cartel pricing structure. The established global financial order, which relied on the petrodollar for decades, right, is framed right here as the latest victim of these cold-blooded calculations. Which leaves us with a truly chilling final question posed by the documentary's analysis. What actually happens to the world order when legacy and sentiment are totally replaced by absolute strategic dominion? The source material really forces us to sit back and ponder the dark reality of a rising superpower that consciously chooses dominion over traditional diplomacy. It's a gripping look at the harsh, unyielding mechanics of geopolitical survival. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown gave you a clear, engaging view into the source material.